The veil dropped to the floor. Her voice cut sharp. "I will not marry a black man!" Gasps filled the hall. Guests turned, whispers slicing the air. He stood frozen, dressed in his suit, heart shattered, humiliated in front of everyone. To her, he was nothing. Just a man unworthy of her family's name. But what she didn't know was that in less than 10 minutes, his story would flip the world upside down. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if this happened to you? Before we begin, hit subscribe. It's appreciated. It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. Daniel had grown up dreaming of a moment like this, walking down the aisle, starting a family, building a future with the woman he loved. He wasn't a rich man, not from a powerful family, but he carried something far greater: kindness, loyalty, and a heart that believed love could conquer anything. To him, this wedding was proof that two people from different worlds could come together, bound by something deeper than status or skin color. But behind the scenes, cracks had already begun to show. Her parents never truly accepted him. They smiled in public, but behind closed doors, they whispered doubts about his background, his upbringing, and most of all, his race. Daniel sensed it, but he brushed it aside, clinging to the hope that love would be enough to silence prejudice. He invested every bit of himself into preparing for the big day, working extra hours, saving money, and making sure every detail was perfect for her. Friends admired him. Neighbors respected him. And yet in the circles of wealth and power her family moved in, he was seen as an outsider, someone who didn't belong. Still, Daniel held his head high, believing that if he could prove his devotion, he would eventually be accepted. After all, wasn't love stronger than hate? As the wedding day drew closer, the tension thickened. Little comments slipped through about his skin, his heritage, his place in their world. Each remark stung, but Daniel stayed silent. He thought patience would win them over. He thought love would shield him from the sharp edges of racism. He thought she would choose him no matter what. He had no idea that the very moment he was most vulnerable, standing before friends and family, she would strike the cruelest blow. If you were in Daniel's place, standing at that altar, blindsided by betrayal, what would you do? The guests stared in silence, their shock hanging heavy in the air. Daniel's heart pounded as her words echoed, "I will not marry a black man." She didn't lower her voice. She wanted everyone to hear. The music had stopped. The flowers that lined the aisle suddenly looked cheap, meaningless. The love he thought he had found crumbled in front of hundreds of eyes. Her father leaned back in his chair with a smirk of satisfaction. He had always hated Daniel's presence, and now, in this cruel display, his victory was complete. For them, Daniel wasn't a groom, he was a mistake, a humiliation to their bloodline. She walked away, leaving him stranded at the altar like a discarded piece of furniture. The whispers grew louder. Some guests avoided his gaze, others shook their heads, and a few even chuckled under their breath. Humiliation burned hotter than fire. Daniel didn't run. He didn't lash out. He stood there, shoulders heavy, but eyes fierce with something none of them expected: dignity. He gathered what little strength he had left, straightened his back, and walked out of that hall. The humiliation was public, but so would be his redemption. Days turned into weeks, and the story spread across town like wildfire. Some mocked him, saying he should have known better. Others pitied him. But what no one knew was that his life was about to collide with a destiny so extraordinary. It would silence every insult thrown his way. One evening, while helping at a charity gala, a place he had volunteered many times before, he caught the attention of someone unexpected. A young woman with grace, poise, and presence that commanded the room. She was not just another guest. She was Princess Amara, daughter of a royal family visiting from abroad. Unlike the cold stares he had grown used to, her eyes carried warmth. Unlike the whispers that followed him at the wedding, her words carried genuine kindness. Their worlds could not have been more different. She, royalty. He, a man scarred by rejection. But instead of recoiling at his skin color, she admired his resilience. Instead of looking down on him, she saw his heart. And while her family had the power to silence millions, She used her voice to amplify his worth. But with admiration came danger. Not everyone welcomed their bond. Rumors spread quickly, twisting their friendship into scandal. The same kind of prejudice that had crushed his wedding now followed him into circles of power much greater than before. Court officials whispered, tabloids erupted, and even members of her own family raised eyebrows. How could a princess fall for a man who had been publicly shamed, a man deemed unfit by those who still measured worth in skin? Every glance, every rumor, every obstacle was designed to break him. But Daniel had learned something that night at the altar. Humiliation can either bury you or shape you. And this time he refused to be buried. Still, the pressure mounted. The stakes were no longer just about a broken wedding. They were about defying centuries of prejudice, standing firm in the face of royalty, and proving that dignity was more powerful than hate. What Daniel didn't know was that another public reckoning was coming, one far greater than the one that shattered him at the altar. This time, the whole world would be watching. The palace ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, cameras flashing from every corner. Daniel stood beside Princess Amara, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what this moment meant. It was her family's grand announcement, a royal gathering broadcast to millions. And standing at the center of it all was the man once humiliated at his own wedding. The king rose, his voice stern and commanding. He spoke of tradition, of heritage, of duty. Then his eyes narrowed on Daniel, and the words grew sharper. "This man is not one of us. He is not fit for this family." The crowd erupted in gasps, some nodding in agreement, others waiting in tense silence. It was the same dagger of rejection, but this time sharpened by royal power. Daniel's chest tightened. Memories of that wedding day came flooding back, the whispers, the smirks, the cruel abandonment. For a moment he thought history was about to repeat itself. But Amara reached for his hand, her fingers steady, her voice unshaken. "With respect, Father, I choose him. Not for his status, not for his skin, but for the man he is." The hall froze. Reporters leaned forward, microphones catching every word. Her defiance against the throne wasn't just bold, it was history-shaking. Daniel's heart raced. If she stood with him, the world would erupt in scandal. If she let go, he would collapse under the same humiliation again. The king's guards shifted uneasily. The crowd whispered louder, and in that tense silence, Daniel realized the truth. This was bigger than him. Bigger than their love. This was about whether dignity could finally win against centuries of prejudice. The king's glare cut deep. The choice was clear. Either Daniel walks away, or both he and Amara would pay the price of defiance. What do you think happens next? Do they crumble under the pressure, or does love finally silence hate? The silence broke not with rejection, but with applause. At first, just a few hands clapping, then a wave that spread across the ballroom like fire. Reporters leaned in, cameras flashing brighter. The world had heard the king's words, but they had also heard the princess's. And in that clash of tradition and courage, the people chose courage. The royal family could no longer silence what had already become a global story. Daniel, the man once humiliated and discarded, now stood at the side of a woman whose defiance shook the walls of a palace. Within weeks, the impossible happened. The king, pressured by his people, by the media, and by history itself, bowed not just to his daughter's will, but to the truth. Daniel was welcomed, not as a servant or an outsider, but as a husband. The wedding that followed was nothing like the one he had lost. There were no cruel whispers, no smirks, no mocking laughter. This time, the aisle was filled with cheers. This time, the world wasn't watching him be humiliated, it was watching him rise. And when Amara walked toward him, her crown gleaming, her smile steady, it was more than a union. It was a victory against prejudice. But Daniel knew this story was not just his. His pain was shared by millions, men and women dismissed, mocked, or broken simply because of their race. His triumph was rare, but it carried a message. No cruelty, no rejection, no tradition of hate could erase the worth of a human heart. He had been told he was not good enough. He had been left behind in front of hundreds. But in the end, he was chosen, not just by a woman, but by history itself. So I ask you, how many more Daniels must endure humiliation before the world finally accepts what love already knows? Show some love with a like and subscribe to stay inspired.